Iran reported no U.S. strikes overnight for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, but the Houthis attacked Saudi Aramco facilities, and Trump met with advisors to discuss expanding the war. Ukraine's protests have entered their 9th day and turned indefinite, and Zelensky struck an Iranian arms ship in the Caspian Sea. And a woman was found dead in a freezer at a Miami Dollar Tree. A man was arrested for a performance with a vacuum cleaner at a Kissimmee resort, and Florida is deploying armed drones to respond to school shootings. I'm Lumina, and this is the Daily Dumpster Fire. Iran reported no U.S. strikes overnight into Saturday for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. Iranian Health Ministry spokesperson Hossein Kermanpour posted on X that Iran had a peaceful night without any attacks reported. U.S. Central Command did not immediately respond, but unlike the previous 13 nights, it did not announce new strikes. The peaceful night does not mean the conflict is de-escalating. It means the United States did not bomb anything for approximately 8 hours, which is now considered a diplomatic breakthrough. Because while the skies over Iran were quiet, the Houthis announced strikes on Saudi Aramco oil facilities in Jizan and Yanbu on Saturday, firing dozens of ballistic and cruise missiles and drones that they claim successfully hit their targets. Sirens sounded multiple times in Saudi Arabia's Yanbu and Jizan provinces, which house crucial oil facilities on the Red Sea. Bahrain also sounded missile alerts early Saturday. The Houthi spokesperson confirmed the military blockade of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait remains in effect, and warned, "We will not hesitate to expand our operations and escalate our actions." President Trump, meanwhile, met with top advisors behind closed doors at the White House on Friday to discuss his options on Iran, including the possibility of significantly expanding military action, according to 2 sources familiar with the matter. When asked by a reporter whether blowing up civilian power plants and bridges, something he has threatened to do, is a war crime, Trump declined to answer. I won't respond to that question," he said. "Who are you with?" The reporter said the New York Times. "Figured so," Trump said, failing New York Times. The president also said he trusts Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin when they say they are not selling weapons to Iran, despite Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth saying China and Russia are enabling what Iran is doing. Trump's response: "I don't think they'd want to have me disappointed." And in a development that connects the 2 major wars of this moment, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced Saturday that his country had struck a vessel carrying military shipments to Iran in the Caspian Sea. "We also achieved very strong results with long-range strikes in the Caspian Sea, including vessels used in military cargo shipments involving Iran, as well as a warship," Zelensky said. The strike adds a new dimension to a conflict that was already operating on multiple fronts. The Strait of Hormuz, meanwhile, saw only 6 ships pass through on Thursday. Traffic through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait recovered to 49 vessels, just below the daily average. An Omani delegation visited Tehran for talks on governing the Strait of Hormuz, and the U.S. disabled a 5th ship attempting to break the blockade, firing into its engine room after the crew tried to run the blockade 4 times. The peaceful night was not a pause, it was a breath between escalations. For a 9th day, Ukrainians have gathered in cities across the country to demand the reinstatement of former Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov, and the protests have now turned indefinite. The Kyiv Independent reported Friday evening that protesters say their campaign will continue indefinitely until Fedorov is returned to the Defense Ministry. The Friday deadline that protest organizers had set has now passed. Zelensky met one of their 2 demands by sacking Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrskyi earlier this week, but the second demand, Fedorov's reinstatement, remains unmet, and Fedorov has made clear he will accept no role other than defense minister. The protests have now lasted 9 days in a country at war. Russia, sensing the political distraction, is planning a massive missile attack against Ukraine within 48 hours, according to Zelensky. The president also warned of a significant wave of Russian mobilization in the fall. And in a development that adds a diplomatic dimension to the domestic crisis, Zelensky is expected to meet President Trump in Washington next week during a visit for the funeral of the late U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham. The meeting will take place against the backdrop of a war in Ukraine that has not paused for the protests, a war in the Middle East that has not paused for anything, and a Ukrainian president who has just struck an Iranian arms ship in the Caspian Sea. The 9th day of protests in a country fighting for its survival is not a small thing. The indefinite nature of the campaign means the political crisis is no longer bounded by a deadline. it is bounded only by the outcome. And now, 3 stories from a world in which a woman was found dead in a freezer at a Miami Dollar Tree. A man was arrested for a performance with a vacuum cleaner at a Kissimmee resort, and Florida is deploying armed drones to respond to school shootings. Story 1: Miami police are investigating after a woman was found dead in a freezer at a Dollar Tree location. The body was discovered around 8 a.m. by an employee. The details are sparse, which is the police department's way of saying they do not yet have an explanation for how a human being ended up inside a commercial freezer at a discount retail store. The investigation is ongoing. The questions are not small ones. Story 2: A man was arrested in Kissimmee, Florida, after authorities say he was seen performing a sexual act with a vacuum cleaner outside a home at a resort. The location is a resort. The time was apparently during daylight hours. The prop was a household appliance. The man was arrested. The vacuum cleaner, one assumes, was returned to its primary function, though it may never recover from the career change. Story 3: Florida officials are selecting districts to participate in a new pilot program that will deploy armed drones to respond to school shooting incidents. The state that has produced more school shooting drills than most countries have produced school shootings is now preparing to automate the response. The drones will be armed. They will be deployed to schools. The logic is that the best way to stop a shooter is with another machine that can shoot. Florida has looked at the problem of gun violence in schools and arrived at the conclusion that the solution is more guns but faster, and without a human having to make the decision. The pilot program is selecting districts now. The dystopian implications will be workshopped later. Day 148. The first peaceful night in 2 weeks was not a ceasefire. It was a pause between rounds during which the Houthis attacked Saudi oil infrastructure. Trump discussed expanding the war, and Ukraine struck an Iranian arms ship in the Caspian Sea. The protests in Kiev have turned indefinite, and the president is flying to Washington for a funeral and a meeting. And Florida is preparing to arm drones and send them into schools, because the state has looked at every possible solution to gun violence and chosen the one that involves more guns and removes the human from the decision loop. The connecting thread is that nobody in this episode is trying to stop the escalation. They are all trying to escalate more efficiently.